Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. This is a bit of a catch-up video, as it were, some news and notes from the week. I had a pretty busy week, had to squash sort of 5 days work into 4, so left me with little time and energy to do some videos. So effectively this is going to be a recap. It's not so much, I guess, breaking news or anything like that, because the news has a bit of moss on it now, but I did want to weigh in on a few things before they pass by entirely. But first things first, see here on screen, Tyson Fury seen in really good shape. So I guess this puts pay to some of the statements Fury had been sort of hanging out there in interviews, saying he wasn't training, he wasn't motivated, he wasn't fit. Although, you know, this sort of shot here would say otherwise. And I think most of us knew that Tyson Fury, the words, you know, we had to sort of take it with a grain of salt, because he's trying to, get into Joshua's mind, anyone else in the heavyweight division, use a bit of misdirection. But I guess the other thing I was thinking about this is this also this, which was very obvious from the beginning, that he was still in shape when he was saying he wasn't. Maybe in of itself, it's misdirection, because sort of like the Deontay Wilder fight, does he want to sort of present something out there in public, and then he wants people to not believe him, so then he can effectively say what he's going to do and do it. So we could be seeing him sort of building that sort of up, so we look at the statements and bits and pieces that he's hasn't said yet but will say, and we sort of dismiss it. Could be something in that. But clearly Tyson Fury, on the basis of the shot here, he is in shape, and boxing and moving would seemingly be the order of the day if Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury is made for undisputed. We'll have to see if that is actually going to get made in terms of a venue being confirmed, because at the moment that is the holdup. They've agreed to fight, they just need a venue, and they had about 28 days, something like that, to make it. Another guy who's looking in good shape, Andy Ruiz Jr. So see here on screen, this is from the media day, his fight with Chris Arreola coming up the 1st of May. And I think this might be the best condition that I've ever seen Andy Ruiz Jr. in. And I know some people will say, well, that's not a high bar, but for him, often he looks, even when he is in pretty decent condition for him, he looks out of shape, but Ruiz Jr. actually looks in decent condition here. And when you consider that his sort of career low weight in the ring is in the mid 240s, he is a guy who's been in the high sort of 290s when he first came into the heavyweight division. He's often been 255, 260-ish, somewhere there or thereabouts for his better weights when he's put in good performances. If he's coming in anywhere below that, well, I think that's a win, and obviously shows the dedication since he's been with Eddie Reynoso, and I guess they were not going to let him slack off in that camp. But I've always said it's not this first fight back after the loss to Anthony Joshua that's the issue, because short-term motivation is one thing, it's can he keep it up? His career and how it's panned out would suggest no, but hopefully he has turned a corner, because I think if Andy Ruiz Jr. is in shape, obviously that helps with the speed front. The hand speed is blaring already, but importantly for him, he needs the foot speed. So if he's not carrying around an extra 20 or 30 pounds of rubble, it's going to help. It will. So good on Andy Ruiz Jr. for actually putting in the work. And he himself has said he doesn't want to come in over 255. And based on this, he may come in, significantly under. I mean, how much under? Who's to say? Derek Chisora is now working with Buddy McGirt. So McGirt, a noted trainer. And this is an interesting move for me, because I remember when McGirt started working with Sergey Kovalev, and I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then he went into that rematch with Elidia Alvarez. He was using his sort of more of his amateur pedigree, sticking it long with the jab, and he just looked like a different fighter from the version that lost to Alvarez just, 4 or 5 months before that. So what is the plan here for these two? Is McGirt going to try to make Chisora box a bit more? Chisora obviously has said previously he's not a boxer, he's a brawler, and he's going to go after his opponents. But potentially maybe we'll see a little bit more nuance in his game with the addition of Buddy McGirt to his team. I actually think this is a good addition. And for a guy like Joseph Parker, who does like to sort of fight in a more technical way, he likes to use footwork, use the ring, use the jab. it could be interesting to see what McGirt can sort of throw up here to counter some of that. So what do you make of this? Derek Chisora and Buddy McGirt working together, and this is also a May 1st fight, Chisora and Parker. Jermaine Franklin and Stephen Shaw has been officially announced for April the 22nd. So this is part of the Ring City USA series, and this was something that Shaw actually announced on his social media a few weeks back, but only officially now confirmed. And Franklin himself, he is currently 20-0. He says, April 22nd, I will be 21-0. Thank you, NBC Sports and Salita Promotions. Dude been talking a lot of trash. Trust and believe I'm going to close his mouth. I'm catching a body, number 21. So Jermaine Franklin spelling out his intentions. So this is one of these sort of fights where, and someone actually from Jermaine Franklin's family had come on to the preview video that I did when it was announced by Stephen Shaw, saying that I was hating on him. But I don't think actually measuring his performance against his peers and say that he hasn't really delivered in his recent fights, I don't consider that hate. I just think it is what it is. Jermaine Franklin is due a good performance. He hasn't looked great against the likes of Jerry Forrest, Rydell Booker. Arguably, some people believe that he lost one or both of those fights. And then he sort of laboured against Pavel Sauer. Sauer, we've seen getting stopped even by Nathan Gorman, who by heavyweight standards is considered not a big puncher. So he's got a lot to prove in this. He's been saying he's the best American prospect coming through, that he will be a heavyweight champion. I want to see him put in a good performance against the guy in Stephen Shaw, another undefeated guy who's actually a good talent. And both of these guys have been toiling away somewhat in obscurity. I mean, Franklin's had more of a push because he's been on some Showtime cards, but this could be a coming out party for either guy. I think Stephen Shaw more so because he's had less promotional push in his career so far. The biggest stage, I believe, for both of these guys in their career. So make or break to some extent for the next stage of their careers. Joe Joyce has announced that he's going to be working with young heavyweight prospect Johnny Fisher in an advisory capacity. So Fisher, just the one fight under the belt, 21 years old. So Joyce says on his social media, watch out for hashtag the Romford Bull. Johnny Fisher has been part of my training camp for my past couple of fights. I've seen him grow and develop into a fantastic prospect with a great future ahead of him in the sport. Delighted to now be advising Johnny alongside S-Jam Boxing, bringing my experience to help build a great career for the hashtag the Romford Bull, hashtag the Juggernaut. So I thought this was quite interesting because when you consider there's already quite a few people involved in his career to some extent. Fisher's working with Matchroom, he's managed by S-Jam Boxing, and then you have another mouth to feed now in Joe Joyce, who'll be advising him as well. So yeah, it's interesting from that perspective, and Joyce, from his side of the fence, I think this could be maybe a prelude to, a future after boxing. Perhaps he will get into the management and advising of fighters. And with his breadth of experience in the sport through the amateur and now the pro game, this could be something where he can add a lot of value. Joyce is actually, even though he doesn't come across as the most charismatic guy, he's a very smart cookie. So I think he could add a lot of value here. Although you could certainly argue from Fisher's side, another guy to feed, it's another cut. I mean, who knows what Joyce will be getting, but it's an interesting link-up, and they have been working closely together, sparring together. Fisher was one of the sparring partners ahead of the Dubois fight. The rising American heavyweight prospect Jared Anderson, who's currently 8-0, is set to face Jeremiah Karpency on April the 10th on the Smith-Vlasov undercard. So I'm not going to get too much into this one because I will do a broader preview with some of the other undercard fights, quite a few heavyweight fights on this card. But Karpency, a record of 16-2-1. Yeah, this is an okay fight for the level that Anderson is at in his career. But Sonny Conto, the 6-0 prospect who's been injured for about just over the past year, he'll be returning to the ring and facing Waldo Cortez Acosta, who he was meant to fight back in February, I should say, but Acosta had to pull out through some sort of of medical issue. Also on that card, you've got Trey, Lippe, Morrison, the press release, which is a little bit out of date now. Yeah, it still says it was TBA. And Jermaine Milton, who has been sparring quite a few guys in the heavyweight division, including Daniel Dubois last year. He's been working with Michael Hunter as well more recently. He's facing a guy, Javon Daphne, who's 2-2. So this is a card headlined by Joe Smith Jr. versus Maxim Glasov, so I'll get more into the previous side a little bit in another video. And another prospect who's had a decent fight confirmed is the former amateur standout and world champion Magomedrasul Majidov. He'll be facing Andrei Fedosov on April 17, so we'll do a preview on this as well. But he's only 4 fights deep so far, and with, I guess, the inactivity which has been brought about by the pandemic, they want to sort of move him along a bit more quickly now. They're sort of tossing him in a little bit deeper than a regular prospect would sort of, be tossed in. He's 34 years old, so we have to bear that in mind. This is his 4th pro fight. So, quite this sort of step up, and if he can get through Fedosov, who's been a decent pro, a record of 31-3, hasn't really been so relevant in recent years, but that certainly is a good test for him at this stage. And rounding out this video, we have Tony Yoka. He is in a negotiations period according to the EBU website. Yoka, the French heavyweight, who is the EU title holder, not to be confused with the EBU title, but the European Union title. It is by the same body, but different strap. He is in a negotiations period with Herve Hubo, the Belgian. So this is interesting because if Yoka does face him, it will be the 2nd consecutive Belgian that he faces. But also, you could go, is the career sort of arc of Yoka just flattening out in terms of what they're doing? Because he fought Christian Hammer, and that was a decent step up towards the end of 2020. And then they dropped down to Joel Tumbwe-Jeko. And if they face Herve Hubo, who's really a bit of a faded force now, he was always just an okay heavyweight, but certainly that would be another sort of, so sort of opponent, not really in the direction that I think a lot of people would expect Yoka to be going in, but I guess they have to look at the pandemic and the options that are available, and they have to consider when are they going to make the move to the United States. But it could also be another scenario here that maybe they're looking at some of the recent performances, assessing his performances, this is Yoka, and going, he needs some more rounds, he needs some more experience, some activity, maybe they just need to slow things down. So that is one thing to consider. But drop a comment loud and off, and hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.